What is going on, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. Coach, it is hard to believe we are. It's days. It's days until the draft. What's up, Coach? How are you?
I'm great. How are you, man? Did you enjoy the Masters over the weekend?
Loved it. I love
Yeah.
every bit of that weekend. It's always sad when it's over. It's like, man, I got to wait till next year because it's my favorite major because it's always in the same course. But did you watch? Did you take in any golf?
I watched on Sunday. I did. And I was actually thinking about if Rory McIlroy lost, I was going to do a podcast on pressure. I still may do one, but I was thinking about the unbelievable weight that must bear, especially in golf when it's such an individual thing. So, but I was
Well,
glad he won. I was happy for him.
it's the big time moments making the big time shots. And it's the same in football. Like I remember you were so impressed with Rams, Bengals, Matthew Stafford doing a no look pass in the freaking Super Bowl
Yeah.
to ice away the win. Like that takes a level of skill that most of us will never even see, let alone experience. And Rory, he had the greatest shots in the world, and he also had some of the most boneheaded shots in the world. It was a roller coaster ride of a Sunday. But yeah, I think the clutch factor is definitely big. Terry Bradshaw, our guy, if you take away his 4 Super Bowls, is he in the Hall of Fame? No.
Nope. Not even close.
His statistics are awful, but he was a
Yeah.
big time clutch quarterback, so that
Yeah.
matters. But all right, let's talk about some football. We just, in case you're a first time listener, we do 5 topics and a profile at the end. We're starting off with some news that happened Friday. Derek Carr, the New Orleans Saints, has reportedly suffered some type of setback, a shoulder injury. I've heard an AC joint, and they don't even know what his 2025 is going to look like. He could be done for the year. The question isn't how does that impact the Saints? It's how does this impact the draft? Coach, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. There's been a lot of buzz now about the Saints perhaps being in on Shedeur Sanders because that Carr, they're saying, could have his entire season in jeopardy.
Right.
So they pick at 9th. You've got Shedeur Sanders sitting there, who it's looking increasingly like he's going to get past the first couple of teams. Then you got a few teams there in at like 6, 7, the Jets, teams like that don't need a quarterback. So if New Orleans is there at 9, there's a decent chance they could take him. But I think a team that makes it really interesting for right now is their division rivals, the Carolina Panthers, who pick at 8, right in front of the Saints. If you're Carolina, this is a great opportunity to field some phone calls from some teams who may want to get up to draft Shedeur Sanders. So you've got sort of the dual opportunity here, maybe to add some draft picks and some draft capital yourselves and move back a little bit in the first round, and then also kind of stick it to a division rival.
It's going to be interesting. And Kellen Moore, first year head coach down there, what kind of quarterback would he want? That's a good question. Is if we're talking about the Saints in particular, what do you think in terms of his offense? And I know you've done a lot of research, whether it's his time in Dallas, his time in Philly last year. What type of quarterback would he even want to have if he were selecting one in this draft class?
Well, if you look at 2 quarterbacks that he has had, Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts, and you compare what they do well to what Shedeur Sanders does well, then the fit is great. There's a lot of similarities. I mean, Jalen Hurts, a lot of people equate to being a running quarterback, and of course he can run, but that's not really where he does his most damage. He's been a great RPO quarterback. He's done some good things from the pocket. The same thing with Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott's not a huge quote unquote running quarterback. He can do it, but they tend to operate more from the pocket in Dallas with him as well. And that's Shedeur Sanders. He is a pocket quarterback who can run, but for whom you're not going to draw up a ton of designed quarterback runs. He's not particularly elusive. He's not particularly fast. Mobile, can extend plays, but not really a guy who's going to make his living out on the edge. So I think the fit, based upon what Kellen Moore has had, is pretty good.
So that's intriguing because I was going to lean on you for that answer because I honestly don't know what Kellen Moore is particularly looking for. I can look at who he had, like you said, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts in his last 2 stops in the NFL. There are some people that could see the Saints going in a different direction. I find it hard to believe that the New Orleans Saints, if let's say Derek Carr's injury is a season-ending injury before it ever started, What are they going to do? Go with Spencer Rattler? Is that it?
No.
Like, you can't do that. Kellen Moore, that's almost like career suicide in his first year as a head coach in the league. They're going to me now, when I start to explain it, it feels like the Saints and the Steelers are very mirrored in terms of the fact that the quarterback position is up in the air. I don't think there's any really great prospects for the Steelers at 21, for the Saints at 9. I don't know, coach. This is a tough spot. What's your final thoughts on it?
I think that if you're New Orleans, that this is a move you pretty much have to make, depending on one thing. And that one thing is this: how long a leash does Kellen Moore have in New Orleans? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if he's been given some assurances by the front office there that, hey, provided this isn't a total disaster, we're going to give you a little bit of time, because New Orleans is not one or two players away. I mean, they got some moves to make before they even, get competitive.
Right.
And so if they believe Shedeur Sanders can be a guy whom you can build around going forward, I think they'd be smart to take him.
It'll be interesting. And Shedeur Sanders, man, he's that one prospect. We've talked about him already on this podcast, where you could see him going top 10, and some people could see him sliding all the way back to the end of round 1. Maybe a team like the Saints would not take him at 9, but try and jump back into the first round if they feel that he's hanging around. It'll be interesting. But let's go to our second topic. This also could have draft implications. Joe Flacco. Yes, that Joe Flacco. Super Bowl MVP Joe Flacco for the Baltimore Ravens, who's bounced around the league the last few seasons, is back with the Cleveland Browns. What do you think this means for the Browns, who have the second overall draft pick? Do they pass on Shedeur Sanders?
I kind of feel it's looking increasingly like they will pass on him. One, you read some reports about how Jimmy Haslam, the owner, absolutely loves Travis Henry. And there are guys in that front office that think that Travis Henry is a game changer in terms of what you can do with him. Two, that there's a lot of speculation that drafting at number 2, that's just too high to take Sanders. And there's no other quarterback you would take there, provided Cam Ward goes 1 to Tennessee. 3, if you bring in Joe Flacco and you pair him with Kenny Pickett, obviously that's not an ideal quarterback room, but Kenny Pickett has won football games in the NFL. He had a winning record as a starter with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Joe Flacco took the Browns to the playoffs a couple years ago when he helped close out a run in a ridiculous season where Kevin Stefanski had to use 4 different starting quarterbacks. I don't think Cleveland feels like they're going to be able to make a deep playoff run with a Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett quarterback room, but it's probably good enough for them to feel comfortable working around. And then maybe in round 2, they're going to have one of the first picks in round 2, trying to land a guy like Jackson Dart or whomever they like best in that second wave of QBs.
I'm going to answer this question with a question you posed about Kellen Moore and the Saints. What kind of assurances does Kevin Stefanski have? Because if they're telling me, if Jimmy Haslam is saying, we're taking Travis Hunter at 2, and I'm saying, okay, you're telling me my quarterback room is Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett? Come on. Like, if this is my last shot to prove that I can do it in Cleveland, if you're going to force me to take Travis Hunter, then you better guarantee that I got a couple years to turn this thing around. Because if you take Jackson Dart with the first pick in the second round, which I think Cleveland has, then if I'm taking Jackson Dart there, it's going to be a project. It's not going to be a come in year 1. So that's curious for me. Your buddy Stefanski's future and how the Browns view him and how much leash is he getting, that tells me a lot about how they handle this second overall pick. Because I think Kevin Stefanski is a good coach. You mentioned how he's won with a number of quarterbacks. But, man, you can't tell me he'd be excited about Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett.
He wouldn't, but what alternative do they have? 1. And 2, if Kevin Stefanski, let's say the Browns go, 6-11, 7-10 next year, and they fire him, I think he gets another job in like 2 seconds. Because no one has been handed a worse quarterback situation over the last couple of years. And the quarterback situation for this coming season, with or without Shedeur Sanders, is going to be bad again.
Right.
So we lament the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh, but imagine if you had to endure what they've had to endure the last couple of seasons.
It's rough. It is rough. And so this adds a lot of drama to the NFL draft for me, because when you talk about the Derek Carr injury and the Saints at 9, when you talk about the Browns at 2, every single pick that's made, and I don't think the Titans are moving off of the number 1 overall pick no matter what. So Cam Ward, what happens after that? Like the quarterbacks, how many quarterbacks go? How many quarterbacks, just out of curiosity, do you see going in round 1 in general?
2, 3 at max. I would say 2 though. I think Ward and Sanders go in round 1. Maybe somebody makes a play for Jackson Dart in the 20s somewhere. Maybe it's a team from early in round 2, like the Giants, trading back into the first round to get him, something like that. So I would set the ceiling at 3 though.
Okay. All right, let's go to our third topic, off-field issues escalating with Tyreek Hill. I'm not even sure what the latest news is, but I did hear that the NFL is reviewing some stuff. And your question was, is he entering late career Antonio Brown territory? So why don't you lay out what's happening with Tyreek Hill now, and then we'll discuss it.
So just a couple of run-ins with the police in recent weeks over domestic issues. Nothing, no domestic abuse or anything like that, but police called to the house. The latest one had him in a big argument with his wife involving his participation in their daughter's life. And there's a video that emerged of him kind of like carrying the baby around on a balcony. And the wife said there's no physical abuse, but that she is worried about his state of mind, his anger issues. She's filing for divorce. She doesn't want the kid around him. He seems to be enraged by all of this. I hate to see an athlete on a slippery slope like this, because we saw where it went with Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown, as you and I were talking about on the show last week when we were when we were kind of commemorating Julio Jones's career.
Right.
We said in his prime, Antonio Brown is arguably one of the greatest receivers in NFL history, and it deteriorated fast. And it had very little to do with what his on-field production and everything to do with what was going on with him away from the field. And while Tyreek Hill is still, again, producing at a really high level, there have just been increasing reports about his personal life or his life away from the game beginning to unravel. And you don't want to see him go down that road. He's a fabulously talented individual, but he's obviously had his history, and he's in a tricky spot right now.
To me, my take on Tyreek Hill is that it goes back to when the Chiefs traded to Miami. I was stunned because really he was at that time, and he had some off-field stuff coming into the NFL and had some off-field stuff in Kansas City as well. But when they traded him, it was a good trade, I think, for both parties in terms of what they got in return. But I was shocked because you just don't trade those type of players away. Antonio Brown would never have been traded when he was in his prime. The Steelers tolerated a lot of stuff. It wasn't until he didn't show up for a game essentially on time and they said, okay, enough's enough. And then he forced his way out. I don't think the Steelers wanted to trade him to the Raiders for a 3rd and a 5th round pick. I think that they wanted to keep him, but he was like, I'm done. That was the first red flag to me when Kansas City and Andy Reid, and that's an organization that is known for being willing to tolerate some stuff. We'll put it that way. I agree with the slippery slope comment that you made. It just doesn't seem like Tyreek Hill is on the right path. Unfortunately, man, I don't know where this is going to end. Unfortunately, if you follow the Antonio Brown path, it's going to be that he's just going to be a free agent, and who knows what's going to happen. But what's your prediction with how this ends up?
Well, he had a streak of 1,000-yard seasons snapped this past year. He wasn't healthy. Tua Tagovailoa, his status affected Hill's production, and I think this is a big year for him. He's either going to rebound and put together a solid year again, or if there's injury issues and decreased production and things like that, and then off the field stuff, you might see Miami move on. You might see Miami say he's north of 30 now, and it's not going to get any better, and we're going to get whatever we can possibly get for him by moving on now, like the Chiefs did. They moved on sooner than they had to, but I think that they recognized what was there and made the move they thought was prudent.
Could it be a draft day trade even where the Dolphins are weighing their options and maybe there's a team that doesn't get a wide receiver and they're like, hey, we'll send you Tyreek Hill. That'll be interesting. That'll be really interesting to see what they do and how they handle that. But Tyreek Hill, dynamic, both on and off the field, in right and wrong. So let's go to our fourth topic, Ashton Jeanty draft prospects. All right. Could he go as high as Jacksonville at number 5? Is it worth taking a running back with a top draft pick in the draft anymore? This is skewed itself. It was just a couple years ago where they were having group texts and phone calls about how I guess the position was just degrading itself and it wasn't valued. It was devalued, I think is the best way to put it. But now that changed with Saquon Barkley in Philly, with Derrick Henry in Baltimore. You look at some of the first round running backs that have gone and been very productive. You have one in Detroit. You have one in Atlanta with Bijan Robinson. Coach, what's your approach to the running back position in Ashton Jeanty in particular?
I'm a little biased, man. I love running backs. I still think that they're, the heart and soul of teams. And yes, Barkley, who was a top 10 pick, Bijan Robinson was a top 10 pick. I think Jahmyr Gibbs fell just outside the top 10. A lot of people bashed the Lions when they picked Jahmyr Gibbs. I remember, guys like Mel Kiper and all. He's a third-round talent, and now he's a top 5 back in the NFL. We have seen in recent years that, if you land the right guy, there is significant value to a first-round running back, even a guy taken in the top 10. I mean, the fit, though, has to be ideal. Saquon Barkley is a perfect fit. Now, he was good in New York. He's the best running back in the NFL in Philly. Jahmyr Gibbs in that offense in Detroit, the way that they play in space and they get their athletes in space, is a great fit. Bijan Robinson, once Arthur Smith left, because Arthur Smith's style of play wasn't exactly great for Bijan Robinson, and they opened up that offense, you saw him take off. So I think that with Ashton Jeanty, the issue is going to be scheme fit. Is he going to go to a place that can really use him how he needs to be used? I think a great spot for him would be Vegas at number 6. Vegas needs a running back. You've got Pete Carroll, and you think back to Pete Carroll and that Marshawn Lynch, Russell Wilson offense that he had that was so good in Seattle for those years. And now you've got an opportunity to add Ashton Jeanty, pair him with Geno Smith, who's got some Russell Wilson-like qualities to his game. Great tight end, a lot of run game, a lot of play action, a lot of boot action, etc. I think that's a great scheme fit for Jeanty. Chip Kelly's offense, he knows how to use running backs. So if I were Vegas, and I don't know who else they have on their radar, but I would think long and hard about pulling the trigger on him.
You bring up scheme fit, and a lot of folks, they primarily focus on, when you hear scheme fit, quarterback. What does the coordinator want to do? What is the system? What is the scheme? Does it fit? Is its skill set fit? The way you talk about Jeanty potentially going to a place like Las Vegas makes me think that running back is almost equally as important in terms of a scheme fit. When you talk about the offensive line, how do they like to block? What's the running scheme? You brought up Najee Harris and how you think Najee Harris in LA with the Chargers could be great compared to what he was with the Steelers. Not that he was bad, but he's a first-round draft pick. And I think that's where people get scared. Let me give Najee Harris a shout out and him being the prime example. They get scared that I'm going to spend their favorite team's going to spend a first-round draft pick on a running back who maybe isn't the best fit for their offense. And then you're not picking up his 5th-year option. So in terms of scheme fit, how important is it for the running back position?
Najee Harris, I've always believed, when you watch how he wants to play football, is a gap running back. And what that means is gap schemes are often schemes where you're kind of running to a predetermined hole or location. You've got a lead blocker. There's a lot of guys blocking down on the front side of the play, and then there's pullers or there's kickers, wrappers, etc. But you're running to the B gap, and you're being led up into the B gap by a lineman, and you can get downhill fast, and it's an aggressive style, and you square your shoulders and you hit the hole. I've always thought that's Najee Harris's game. In Pittsburgh, he was in a zone scheme for years where there's an aiming point, but there's no predetermined hole, where your patience matters much more than, your aggressiveness. Your aggressiveness can actually be used against you. I mean, Le'Veon Bell was the ideal zone back, and anybody who remembers his running style can just picture him kind of pitter-pattering his feet behind the line, setting up the blocks, trying to wait to see the opening, and then boom, he goes. And that was not Najee Harris at all. So I think he's a great example of a guy that, while he had 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, his yards per carry and his efficiency was never great. I think he was mismatched. And you get him into the hardball scheme out there in LA, and I think it just suits his style much better.
All right, so I want to go through the top 5 running backs. We already talked about Genty, so we can move on from him. And I want you to tell me what kind of scheme fit and maybe some teams that they would actually jive with as it pertains to being drafted. So this is Bucky Brooks's rankings, so don't kill the messenger. He has the second ranked running back as Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina. Give me a team, give me a scheme fit. Where do you see that working out?
I think Hampton is pretty savvy in both zone and gap game. He's 6 foot, 220 pounds. I mean, he's built tough. I think he's a guy that he can be a good zone runner because he's not quite as committed early in the rep as Najee Harris is. So you've heard talk about the Steelers being a team for him. They're running back needy, but he's just a guy for me that, he had the second most yards after contact in the NCAA last year behind Ashton Genty. So if you can put him behind a decent offensive line and now let him get to the second level, he's going to break a ton of tackles. So maybe those teams picking in the 20s that are a little bit better and have reasonably good offensive lines would be a nice fit for him.
All right, let's go to the third ranked player, Travion Henderson out of Ohio State. What's your take on him?
So I love him, man. But he's a scheme fit guy. He's a zone guy. He excelled in Chip Kelly's offense, inside outside zone. A team that throws the ball to the running back out of the backfield and runs outside zone. That's your guy. And I've been kind of banging the drum for the Steelers to pick him if they can get a late second round pick or if he's around in the third round, because I just think that's his game.
Okay. Let's go to the fourth. That is Quinshawn Junkins. That's another Ohio State guy. He's a junior, as Henderson was a senior on the team. What's your thought on Junkins?
He's a gap back. He's a downhill banger. He's a guy who runs the ball in the A and the B gaps. He's a guy that I think would look great in a bigger personnel offense, an offense that wants to block down and kick out. I could see him going to Baltimore as a backup to Derrick Henry. I think that'd be a great pick for the Ravens at the end of the second round. As Derrick Henry kind of nears the end of his career, you get a guy like Judkins who's got a big physical style like he does. That'd be a smart pick for them.
And the last one, Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee.
I don't know as much, I'll be honest, about Dylan Sampson, but the Volunteers offense was a wide open spread scheme. So what's that mean? That means inside outside zone, throwing the ball to the running back a little bit like Henderson. The guy who's not on that list who I love is Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, who, again, if you're thinking Steelers, man, the outside Iowa made a living running outside zone. That's Arthur Smith's bread and butter. He's a big back like the Steelers like. So if they want an outside zone runner who can carry the load the way Najee Harris did, he's a name to watch.
Okay. So the running backs, could we be seeing a resurgence in the running back department? Coach, what's your final take on that?
I think we're seeing it. I think the salaries have actually gone up a little bit in the last couple of years. Barkley's extension was big for the running back market. And with Genty being a big name and a possible top 10 pick, I think, this has the possibility to stimulate the market again.
All right. Be something to look out for. Now, what's interesting, our fifth topic, this is pretty crazy. I think I saw a stat the other day. It's been over 20 years since every team in the NFL had a first-round pick, which is what's the case is in 2025. No one's traded. There's been no trades at all yet. Normally, you see some movement already. When you think about when the Bears and the Panthers did business to get the first overall pick, and that was obviously Bryce Young out of Alabama, that happened well ahead of the actual draft. Here we are, less than a week away, Coach. What is going on? Like, there's been no trades, and I find this to be shocking. What about you?
I don't know what the reason for it is. I've looked at the draft prospects this year, and outside of the two Colorado guys who have gotten a lot of attention in large part because of their head coach, because Dion is great at
Right.
getting people to shine the spotlight on him and his interests. There aren't flashy guys. There aren't guys that are real sexy. Like Cam Ward's going to be the overall number one pick. I think if he walked into a room, probably 90% of football fans wouldn't know who it is. He's not a real recognizable guy. And then you've got some defensive prospects that are really highly regarded, guys like Abdul Carter. And they're just some names that are kind of vague to most people, or the familiarity that they have isn't great. So I think there's the intrigue about who might go, where, et cetera. It just hasn't been there for this draft. And I know that that's more of the fan perspective, but I wonder if also the quarterback market not being as deep and the lack of those really high profile players is kind of quelling some of the interest from teams that are further back in the first round to try to move up. It's said to be a deep draft at certain positions. Teams might simply be saying, hey, we can stand pat and get good football players, so let's do that.
So with the lack of movement ahead of the draft, do you think there's going to be an increased amount of movement during the draft as things start to unfold, depending on what Cleveland does at 2, depending on what the Saints do at 9? Could you see, okay, we haven't had the movement pre-draft, draft day trades, that could be a different story. What's your take?
That's been the trend in recent years. And with the success of teams like Philly, I mean, Howie Roseman has shown himself to be very aggressive on draft day. Not necessarily in the first round, but moving all over, get this pick, move back here, et cetera. So that seems to be the way that people are going these days. I don't know. I'm going to watch the movie Draft Day and figure out my strategy from that point. So
Okay, you brought it up. Do you like that movie?
I mean, as a football junkie, I like it, but as a in terms of how the sausage gets made, so to speak, no, I don't think that it's a movie.
You don't
No,
think it's accurate?
no, I do not.
Kevin Costner is my favorite actor, so I'll watch anything that he's in.
Yeah.
But yeah, it leaves a lot to be desired. Let's finish this up with it. Not a player profile, but a profile. You want to talk about Brent Musburger. Brent
Yeah.
Musburger, he's getting into the Hall of Fame, isn't he?
Yeah, that's why I brought him up, because Brent
All right.
Musburger is being honored. He's going into the Hall of Fame. He's being honored with kind of like the Lifetime Achievement Award for broadcasters. And, you know, you're younger than me, Jeff, but I'm sure you still remember Brent Musburger. But when I was a kid, Brent Musburger pretty much began every broadcast with the same tagline. You're looking live at wherever he was, right? Whatever game he was, Three Rivers Stadium in Oakland, Alameda County Coliseum, whatever the hell the name was, wherever he was. And that is almost like Pavlovian to me. Like I hear that tagline and I immediately get excited because when I was growing up, there wasn't such tremendous access to football. There was no NFL.com Sunday Ticket. You could access games from 5 different streaming services. It was like NBC and CBS had a 1:00 game and a 4:00 game, and then there was Monday Night Football. There wasn't even Sunday Night Football yet. So those national games were special, and Brent Musburger did those national games. And when I heard his voice, I knew, man, you know, the next 3 hours are going to be great.
So Brent Musburger's to you that Jim Nance is to me.
Probably.
So
Yes.
that's probably very much similar. But when I think of Brent Musburger, I think of a couple things. He always had a way of, and this is before the sports books became legalized. He always found a way to throw in what the spread was. And in late situations, well, they cover, or this could be a backdoor cover. Like he always did that. I thought that was funny. And then I'll never forget him making the comment. I think it was AJ McCarron at Alabama. He was doing an Alabama game and they show his girlfriend or his fiance. He could not stop talking about this girl. Wow, AJ McCarron, boy, he did it, didn't he, guys?
Yeah, that was Brent Musburger in his creepy old man stage, you know.
But hey, he was great at what he did. He was great at what he did, and I think every announcer has something like that on their resume at some point. But still, all right, Coach, this would be good. Next time we talk, man, it's going to be the week of the draft. That's hard to believe. Why don't you tell us how you're getting everyone ready on the Call Sheet Daily podcast?
Yeah, it's interesting. Monday, it's not a draft conversation, but Monday's episode was on the Nico Iamaleava situation, the NIL situation with him leaving the University of Tennessee. I've been wanting to do an NIL show for a while, and that one really gave me an opportunity to do it. It's a fascinating and in many ways frustrating topic. That was Monday's Call Sheet Daily, and then Wednesdays is our Whiteboard Wednesday. I got Tim Watson, former NFL player. Tim Watson is a coach in this area. He was in the Tom Brady draft. He was drafted in the 6th round, just a couple picks in front of Tom Brady.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and he's a very successful championship winning coach here in our area. And he's on a program Wednesday talking about the tight front on defense, and then we'll start to really get into our draft stuff. So I tried not to get too early into it, but here we are.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I thought about. My own podcast for the Steel Curtain Network is this upcoming lead up to the draft. I want to give people just, hey, here's some names you need to know. Like day 1, day 2 type guys. You just got to know these names. After that, no one. You're going through the weeds at that point. Those day 3 players, you got to be a draftnik to know all that stuff. So that's like Andrew Wilbar and Jeremy Betts. So, all right. So make sure you check out Coach's podcast, wherever you get your podcast, by searching the Call Sheet Daily. And Coach, it's been another good show, man. Take it easy. We'll talk next week.